Hello, Elizabeth Osborne present. Can you hear me?
So much.
Okay,
Yes.
We can.
great, thanks.
Department of Ecology,
Blake Nelson, Department of Ecology, present.
Department of Fish and Wildlife,
Nate Pamplin, Fish and Wildlife.
Department of Natural Resources,
Maverick Ryan, DNR.
Utilities and Transportation Commission,
Brian Ryberick from the UTC, present.
Assistant Attorney General John Thompson,
I am present.
Administrative Law Judge Courtney Beebe,
I am present.
and then I will call staff anticipated to speak. Sonia Bumpus,
Present.
Amy Hopkemeyer,
Present.
Maria Balkina,
Present.
Lance Caputo,
Present.
Lisa McLean,
Present.
and Carl Halapa.
Present.
And do we have anyone present for the Council for the Environment? Chair, there is a quorum for the council.
Thank you, Ms. Grantham. I expect that council probably feels we've done our introductions and staff, but let me just double check if there are any other opening words of introduction from Sonia Bumpus or others.
No comments.
All right. And just in lieu of the Council for the Environment, which generally is always here, and I think if John Thompson, our council online, wanted to just give a brief word on their behalf, ultimately they are here to be an advocate for the environment, but for the people of Washington and the environment. So Council Thompson, any other quick word you wanted to note about that role since I stated that we would explain it?
Yes, generally, there's a statutory role for a Assistant Attorney General to serve in the role of counsel for the environment and generally to represent the interests of the environment in the adjudicative hearing before the council. I believe that the Attorney General has appointed Yuri Carroll for the role in this case. And yeah, that's about it.
Very well, thank you. So with that, let me exercise a little prerogative as the chair, which is that I will hold on our further introductions from the Cascade Renewable Transmission Project, just so that perhaps we could do that in a more fulsome way when you come up to make your presentation. So with that, I would ask the FSEC staff to give the siting process overview presentation.
Okay, doesn't work. Excuse me. Could you help me with clicker? Okay.
There you go.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you all for coming to participate this evening. My name is Maria Belkina. I am siting specialist for FSEC, and I will be giving a short presentation on the FSEC process for those who are unfamiliar with our agency. A little bit on the history of the FSEC agency. FSEC was created in 1970 for the siting of thermal power plants. The intent was to create a one-stop permitting agency for large energy facilities. FSEC is comprised of the state and local government members who review each application before voting to make a council recommendation to the governor. If recommending approval, the package to the governor includes a draft site certification agreement or SCA, which defines all pre-construction, construction, and operation plans. If approved by the governor office, the decision preempts other state or local regulations. FSEC is comprised of members from several different state-level agencies. The chairperson is appointed by the governor, and there are standing members from the 5 other agencies appointed by those agencies to sit on the council. The current council is made up of Chair Kurt Bucket, Blake Nelson from the Department of Ecology, Nate Pamplin from the Department of Fish and Wildlife, Elizabeth Osborne from the Department of Commerce, Maverick Ryan from the Department of Natural Resources, and Brian Rybarek from the Utilities and Transportation Commission. There are additional agencies that may elect to appoint a council member during the review of a new application. These agencies are the Department of Agriculture, the Department of Transportation, the Department of Health, and the Military Department. The local county shall also appoint the council member for the review of a new application. If a proposal project is located at the port may appoint a non-voting member. Oh. The facilities. Oh. Here we go. Multiple energy generation facilities fall under FCX jurisdiction. Some projects, such as thermal power plants greater than 350 megawatts and nuclear generation for the purpose of generating electricity, are required to be cited through FCX, while others, such as wind, solar, green hydrogen storage, or clean energy manufacturing, can opt in at any size. Transmission lines greater than 150 kilovolts, 15 kilovolts can also opt in, while lines greater than 500 kilovolts, alternating current, or 300 kilovolts direct current are required. Thresholds for pipelines and refineries that may be cited through FCX are found in the Revised Code of Washington, or RCW 80.50.060. Here is a map of the facilities that are certified or have applied for certification under FCX jurisdiction. You can see marked in green. There are 6 operating facilities, including 2 natural gas facilities, 1 nuclear facility, 1 solar facility, and 2 wind facilities. The blue marks indicate the 4 additional facilities that are approved, but are not yet constructed. The clear circle is the one facility in the process of the decommissioning. FCX is currently reviewing 7 projects marked by yellow, including the Cascade Renewable Transmission Project, which brings us here this evening. Here is a flowchart showing the general process an applicant will go through when they submit an application to FCX. There are green arrows on the chart that indicate specific milestones in the process where a council and staff seek public input. You can see that there are multiple processes that happen concurrently when FCX is reviewing an application. The permitting process outlined across the top row involves identifying and preparing applicable environmental permits. The land use and adjudicative process runs through the middle. And the State Environmental Policy Act, or SEPA, process is shown along the bottom. All these processes ultimately feed into the Council's recommendation made to the Governor, where an adjudication is required. Following the land use consistency hearing, an order is issued to commence proceeding and initiate intervention. Here, members of the public wishing to participate in the adjudication must identify themselves and their issue is in writing. There are pre-hearing conferences through which parties are granted intervention status and issues are identified. Exhibits and testimony are provided, and cross-examination is conducted. After this, the council looks at all information in the adjudication record and deliberates. Finally, the council develops an order establishing their findings, in fact, and conclusions of law from the information provided throughout these proceedings. For every project proposed, a SEPA review is performed when a determination of significance determination of significance and decision to prepare an environmental impact statement, or EIS, is made. Public comments are taken on the scope of the EIS. After public comment for the scoping, the SIPA responsible official determines the scope of the EIS. A draft EIS is prepared and issued with a minimum 30-day public comment period, after which the final EIS is prepared and released. In some instances, a determination of non-significance, a DNS, or mitigated determination of non-significance is issued. If the SIPA responsible official determines that a project meets the criteria of DNS or MDNS, an EIS is not required. In this process, the determination is noticed to the public, and there is a minimum 15-day public comment period on an MDNS, while a DNS required no comment period. Following the conclusion of this separate avenue of application review, the Council develops its recommendation to the Governor, tying together the information brought throughout the application review process. If a project is issued an MDNS and received a determination of land use consistency, it may qualify for expedited process. To be considered for expedited processing, an applicant must make the request in the writing. If the project meets the two aforementioned criteria of land use consistency and MDNS, the Council can grant expedited process review. In this expedited process, the adjudication step is not required and an EIS is not prepared. Application granted expedited processing do hold an additional public meeting prior to the Council's recommendation to hear any condition that may be considered to impose on the project. Consistent with the conditional use process heading, the Council prepares the recommendation to the Governor in an expedited time frame under this process. Permutations. AFSEC is also issuing agency for any applicable state and local environmental permits a facility might require, including water quality and air quality permits as they may apply. The permits are identified in the final package with the Council's recommendation to the Governor. If an application is approved by the Governor, AFSEC then has oversight of the environmental compliance for the life of the facility through decommissioning. AFSEC has standing contracts with applicable state agencies that assist in the monitoring and enforcement of conditions, either in the site certification agreement, identified permits, or EIS or MDNS. AFSEC's enforcement authority extends to the issuance of any penalties as they may apply. At the conclusion of the Council review, a recommendation is made to the Governor to either approve or reject the application. This initiates a 16-day window within which the Governor will then either approve the application, reject the application, or remand the application back to the Council for consideration. Any application that is rejected by the Governor is a final decision for that application. As previously mentioned, AFSEC oversees facilities under its jurisdiction through decommissioning prior to the start of construction of approved projects. An initial site restoration plan is required. Then, at the end of the life of the facility, prior to the start of decommissioning, a detailed site restoration plan is required. These plans must be reviewed and approved by the council, the project must also provide financial assurance for the decommissioning in the event that the project is no longer able to complete this process, assuming the project decommissioned while still under full control of the developer. Those costs will be paid by the certificate holder directly. And thank you for joining us this evening. FSEC appreciates your time and interest in the Cascade Renewable Transmission Project. And our work is closely coordinated with the Oregon Department of Energy and the Army Corps of Engineers, ensuring that both states and federal agencies are aligned in the environmental and permitting review. And also this here, like some representative from Oregon Department of Ecology, the Chris. Christopher Clark. If you have any question, I think you can reach him out. Yeah. That wraps up my presentation this evening. Before I end, I'd like to remind everyone how they may submit comments to this proposal. You may send it written comments, but email to comments@fsec.va.gov by postal mail to our office listed here at 621 Woodland Square Loop, PO Box 43172, Olympia, Washington 98504, 3172, or by phone at 360-664-1345. When FSEC is an active comment period associated with specific milestones, comment might also be submitted to our online comment database at https://comments@fsec.va.gov. All comments received, regardless of timing or method of delivery, will be saved with the project record and available to council and staff for review. I think that's it from FSEC. With that, I would like to turn the microphone over to the applicant team from Cascade Renewable Transmission, who will introduce them. Oh, okay.
Appreciate that. Did you have one other word, Director Bumpus? Okay, if not.
Thank you, Chair Beckett. This is Sonia Bumpus. I just wanted to point out that in addition to the ways that we talked about submitting comments on the slide that you just saw, that information's also with our speaker sign-up sheet there in the back of the room. So if you didn't get that information down during the presentation, you can check with our staff in the back of the room there. Thank you.
Appreciate that. And both tonight, as has been noted, and also in general, while we try to focus public comments around particular comment periods, of course, ultimately you are able to submit comments to FSEC at any point to help ensure that they're part of the record. We encourage those comments during the active recruitment of public comments in each of our periods. So please just know that as we go forward in this project in general. And with that, as was beginning, if we could have our representatives from Cascade Renewable Transmission come forward to make their presentation, and welcome certainly you introducing your team as a whole, in addition to those who will be making formal comments. So thank you. Thank you and welcome. Sorry to have not been more observant of you sitting to my left the whole time. So I was looking out in the audience evidently.
Wasn't sure where you wanted us.
Welcome. Thank you.
Is this all working? Well, okay, good. Uh, Good evening. My name is Chris Hocker. I'm. Is that better? Keep going. A little better. Chris Hocker. I'm with the Cascade Transmission Project. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and members of the council who are with us, either virtually or here. Members of the staff, and particularly you all for coming out. We do have a small team with us tonight. To my left is Susan Brown. And we have several other folks who are involved in project development who would be happy to answer questions after the event. Hopefully you've had a chance to talk to some of them already. The project, and I will try to present it briefly, but it's unique, it's innovative. Its purpose is to help Washington and Oregon achieve, at least partially, their clean energy goals, and to try to lift some of the very serious constraints on the regional transmission system. I also need to acknowledge that we're well aware that this whole area is the ancestral home of indigenous peoples. And so we have been trying to reach out and have productive engagement with the tribes as we go forward. Can you do the clicker? Thank you. Next. So again, I'll try to be brief, but just to start out, what we're talking about here is about 100-mile high voltage transmission line, of which a little more than 80 miles will be under the bed of the Columbia River, and about 19 miles will be buried underground. As we'll see, doing it that way avoids a lot of the negative impacts that are associated with major overhead transmission lines. We expect that it will be built over about a 36 to 42 month period. The in-river installation would only occur during the winter months to avoid impacts on fisheries, and should point out that transmission of this type is not unusual. It's unusual in this particular part of the world, but in fact, there are many underwater transmission lines, including two that the company that we're with have built and operated, the oldest one since 2005. So it's been operating well for about 20 years. Let's go to the next. So briefly, the situation is that both Washington and Oregon passed laws mandating the achievement of clean energy goals by certain dates certain. What is missing is sufficient transmission to bring that renewable energy, or frankly, any energy from the east of the Cascades over to where the major load centers are in the west. Next. So a lot of this is due to a number of factors. Fossil fuel generation is being or has been retired. The transmission capacity that's already in existence to go from east of the Cascades to the load centers in the west is already pretty much at its capacity. New overhead wires and towers are very difficult to permit. And so we have this bottleneck that has been created and is growing almost literally by the day. Now, this next slide is confusing, and I acknowledge it's not an easy one to follow, but it's trying to answer the question, what's in it for Washington? Because we think of, the load center potentially being in the greater Portland area. Of course, that does include Vancouver, Clark County. But this slide indicates that the major flows, these are those blue arrow semicircle things, come primarily from generation east of the Cascades and flow through existing transmission until it gets west to the load centers. And then you can see sort of a north-south path, which is sort of on the calendar for entities like BPA and Portland General and Puget Sound Energy and others to strengthen those transmission constraints so that when the flows come over, that they still need a place to go. In other words, if you don't, it's not just a question of going east to west, it's also a question of going north to south. So by contributing a line like ours, and that's the green, sort of light green line, it goes immediately to the problem of reaching the north-south corridor. And that north-south corridor serves not just the Portland area, but goes all the way up into Clark County, past Clark County, and into the greater Seattle area. So there's a direct benefit to Washington from a transmission point of view. Next. So we call this a unique solution. Again, as I said, this isn't the first time by any stretch that such a project has been done and done successfully. But we've already, as you can see, attracted some interest from the press. But we feel that it helps meet renewable energy goals. It helps improve flexibility, resiliency, and safety of the grid. It helps meet increased load up and down that north-south corridor between Seattle and Portland. And it won't interfere with other infrastructure as well as uses of the river. So this is what the project looks like from a great distance. It's about 100 miles. And what you see in the green is the underwater transmission route. What you see in the yellow are the places where the line will be buried underground. So that's mostly in the Dalles. It's mostly for about 5 miles in the Rivergate industrial area of Portland. And then there's about a 7.5 mile bypass around the Bonneville Dam in Skamania County. The land portion in Washington is simply the bypass that I just referred to. It comes in Stevenson. It primarily takes Route 14 past the Bonneville Dam into the federal property and exits back into the river, as you see there on the map. If you can tell the purple lines, the technology for entering and exit the river is called horizontal directional drilling, or HDD. So that is entirely underground. It goes very, very deep from the land to the river, so that it's not digging a trench or anything into the water. It's done via HDD or drilling. The underground cable itself would be trenched primarily in the bed or the shoulder of Route 14. And that's a very, very conventional way of installing pretty much any kind of utility, whether it be an electric cable or a pipeline or water pipes, that kind of thing. Just real briefly, a little bit of a closer view of the Oregon route. In the Portland area, it exits on Hayden Island. It goes over to the mainland and is buried to what's called a converter station. We'll get to that in a second. And then off to the Willamette River. It will go under the Willamette River to an existing PGE substation called Harborton. On the right-hand figure, there's, I'm sure you know, a very large BPA complex. There's a substation called Big Eddy, and we would propose to build a converter station right by Big Eddy and underground the line down to the river where it would enter the river via HDD. So kind of a fundamental question we get asked, yeah, but why use the river? Aren't there other alternatives? We looked at other alternatives very, very carefully. As we said before, high voltage overhead lines are very, very difficult to site. There are instances in the Pacific Northwest over the last several years where utilities have tried to do that and have been stopped for permitting and environmental issues. It's hard to even imagine building an overhead line through the gorge area. We got asked, well, why don't you just put it in I-84, bury it in I-84? The simple answer to that is that the Oregon DOT and the Federal Highway Administration don't allow for that. Maybe they should, but they don't. Why not bury it all along State Route 14? It's not constructible. The portion that we have identified is constructible because it's pretty open. And we've certainly consulted with the Washington DOT on that. But to do the entire route, as I'm sure we've all driven it many times, there are literally like 300 and something man-made obstacles or natural obstacles to doing that. You can never get it constructed. Same for the railroad rights of way. And we've looked at that as well. They're very narrow, and obviously the railroads wouldn't want to suspend their operation to go through that. So advantages of underwater, it's a proven installation method. There's no visual impacts. And as we'll talk about, the impacts to the environment and fisheries habitat are minimal. It certainly eliminates wildfire risk. Because of the nature of the technology, direct current, it supports the grid if other major lines go down due to weather or whatever. And the underwater portion of the line does not require regular maintenance for its entire life. So what are we talking about? Oh, you can hold it up. It has been suggested that we're talking about putting a massive cable in the river and digging a massive trench in the river. None of that is correct. What Susan is holding up is one of two cables. These are less than 6 inches in diameter. So the bundle is around a foot. And it's combined with a fiber optic cable, which is not a commercial thing, it's a communication thing for the cable system itself. And believe it or not, the bundle can transport 1,100 megawatts of energy. Next. The construction, and it's a little hard to explain this, although you can sort of YouTube it for looking at comparable installations, but it's a specialty process, although there's several companies in the world that do this, where there's a barge or a ship on the surface. The cable is played out into a machine called a hydroplow or a jet plow. The jet plow has a blade that can be adjusted to achieve minimum depth or required depth below the sediment. And the trench, if you will, which is only about 2 feet wide, is formed by water jets, very high pressure water jets. which fluidizes the sediment. The cable is laid down into the trench in a simultaneous process. And about 75% of the sediment virtually immediately settles back down into the trench. So that's how it works. It doesn't leave a scar. It doesn't leave, a huge trench. There's no dredging or mechanical operation. It's done. And again, this is a specialized procedure, but it's one that is done relatively frequently around the world. Now, what you would see if you're looking out at the river is that you'd see a fairly ordinary looking barge, as you see on the left, with a workboat or two. The vessel would proceed pretty slowly, about 1.5 miles a day at best. So it's a very kind of slow and gentle process to lay the cable in the river bed sediment. The depth of the cable would be 10 to 15 feet below the sediment. We mentioned converter stations. It's basically not dissimilar from a regular substation. This photo is of one in San Francisco. There was a similar project built in 2010 called Transbay Cable. What you're seeing is the converter station in San Francisco, where the cable has been operating for 15 years. Next. So, and Maria sort of alluded to some of this, is that this is a complicated project to permit because it comes under federal jurisdiction through the Army Corps of Engineers, through the Washington process, FSEC process, and a comparable process in Oregon. So all of these agencies need to come together and hopefully work cooperatively together to study the project, analyze the project, impose whatever conditions are deemed appropriate on the project, and move forward on kind of a coordinated basis. And thus far, our observation is that they've been doing that, and we appreciate that. We think it's really the only way to come to a decision, yes or no, on this. We have an awful lot of studies either underway or completed, including what happens to the sediment if it's stirred up. How far does it flow down the river? The answer is not very far. Are there any particularly sensitive fishery habitat that will be disturbed by this? Is the bed of the Columbia River suitable for this kind of installation? And on and on. So there are many, many studies. Most of them will be included in one form or other in the permit documents. And this is something that we understand requires an awful lot of analysis and study before it can be approved. Just very quickly, you're seeing where we are in the state of Washington. In the state of Oregon, we have held public meetings earlier in the process when we filed what's called a notice of intent, because the Oregon process is somewhat different from the Washington process, and in some ways requires other types of information that Washington does not. We are completing the application and expect to be filing it in the fourth quarter, in this quarter of this year. The Army Corps of Engineers, obviously, because it's federal waters, the Columbia River has a very strict interest in any of the potential impacts, environmental, navigation, any impact on their facilities. So we are undergoing those reviews. And we have tried very hard to encourage multi-agency coordination We periodically hold meetings among all the agency personnel, not just the Corps, but different state agencies, federal agencies, and more recently, the tribes who have been invited to participate in those meetings. Those are informational meetings, just so everybody, to the extent possible, is on the same page. We feel that there will be some direct benefits, including a lot of construction jobs during the 3.5 years it'll take. We are going to have project labor agreements with the trades in areas where their cable will be buried. There's a potential for property tax base increases. And we're looking for opportunities to partner, whether with tribes, with community colleges, for community organizations to help move forward, because we've done this before. We understand that we can't just walk in and say, well, we're going to lay a cable. That there has to be a partnership, there has to be an understanding, and there has to be benefit. So we fully expect to do that. Our development team, PowerBridge, that's where Susan and I work, is located in Connecticut. As I mentioned before, we have completed 2 such projects between New York and New Jersey. The first one is 20 years old. The other one is coming on 15, and they've been operating very well. Sun 2.0 is a solar developer. However, their interest is in transmission, not in trying to complete a particular generation project or anything like that. And finally, NextEra Energy, and we've got a couple of folks from NextEra here, who is a development partner of ours. They're a leading publicly traded utility and renewable developer, and they're the owners and the operators of the Transbay Cable project in San Francisco that we showed you a picture of. So I'm gonna wind it up. The next page is simply a listing of some of the major marine transmission projects that have been done. Next one, we already talked about our experience. And I guess I'll just conclude by saying that we are experienced developers. We have done this before successfully. We have a lot of respect for the communities and the regions that we're in. We want to be responsive. We want to be compliant, and we want to be partners. So with that, hopefully I didn't take too long, but I appreciate the time very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hawker and Ms. Brown. Appreciate the good overview, and that's certainly the kind of the kickoff starting point at which we are for the FSEC process tonight, is to have this project introduced in our communities of record. And as a heads up, again, for our members of the public and audience, soon we will turn to public comment. Let me first pause, though, and see if members of the council have questions for our applicants who have made the presentation tonight. Council members? Or comments? Council Nelson.
Thank you, Chair Beckett. I was wondering, is that just for scale, or is that an actual representation of the cable?
That's it.
Okay. Would it be okay if I take a look?
Sure.
So does this include the casing of the cable? Is that what this is? Or is there?
That is the casing.
Okay. As a
Yeah.
casing. Do you know what it's composed of? I just wonder about, I don't know, any kind of heavy metals, PPDs, that sort of thing. Is it just rubber?
It's the core of the conductor is copper.
Yeah.
And you're right, there's various kinds of metals that shield it. And the outer skin is a synthetic that essentially protects it.
Thank you.
Appreciate the question. Other council members, any comments or questions? And let me get back to my online screen here just to make sure. Have any other
None from me,
hands
Chair
here?
Becca. I just wanted to give my appreciation for the thorough and thoughtful overview there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Barrett. And I should note, welcome to FSEC, by the way. I apologize for not having noted that earlier. Chair of the Utilities and Transportation Commission, who as of November 1st has also selected a second hat for himself, which is to serve on the FSEC Council for the UTC. So appreciate you joining us tonight, as with everybody.
Thank you.
So last call for questions or comments from the FSEC Council members. Council Pamplin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Also appreciate the overview. Just a question about thinking about the region's future energy demand and the scope and scale of a project like this, and then the size of the transmission line being proposed. And just was curious about what was the calculus that lined up that landed on a 12-inch cable delivering 1,100 megawatts of energy versus something larger that would generate more energy or less to match with the scale of production of energy in Eastern Washington. Thank you.
The sizing of the cable is based on kind of a cross between available technology and economics. In other words, you can get a couple hundred megawatts more through a cable this size. And in fact, if appropriate, depending on how the energy demands go, it's conceivable that we could do that. However, if you wanted to double that, you would basically have to have 2 cable bundles. And you would have associated costs with that, because you can't just lay multiple cable bundles. You have to do it one at a time. And there has to be space. I like to talk with my hands. So it's not just a question of, gee, if we could carry 1,200 megawatts for 12 inches, could you do 2,400 megawatts for 20? No, the answer is no. And we have very carefully, so this wasn't your question, but it's a point I'd like to make. The route we have chosen in the river has not been accidental. It has to do with avoiding side slopes, avoiding sensitive habitat, avoiding rocks, avoiding all kinds of things. So really the cable route is sort of chosen on the basis of elimination. In other words, we can't put it here because of this. We can't put it here because of that. So, and if that's the case, is there such a thing as a constructible path where the hydroplow will work for that length? And the answer is, to the best of our knowledge, yes. But we have conducted a geophysical survey that confirms that. And frankly, if someone said, well, you can only do this one if you'll do a second one, I'm pretty sure I'd say no, just because the constraints of the river itself, of the river bed, are more than you would imagine. And so it's a long answer to a short question, but it is certainly something that we've thought through. The overall energy need is going to probably be 2, 3, 4 times more than the 11 or 12 or 1,300 megawatts that this could conceivably carry. And BPA and others are working on that. But we feel that we are a major step, but certainly not the only step.
Thanks again, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that response. That's very helpful. Just one other question out of curiosity. What's the anticipated lifespan or functional lifespan of this line? Thank you.
The cable manufacturer will tell you 40 years. The reality is, we think longer than that, just because there's really nothing to wear out. As I said before, it doesn't require periodic maintenance. There's no part replacement. This is unless something happens like an anchor strike or something, then clearly you have to repair it. But other than that, it's an inert piece of infrastructure. Our project in New York that goes 60 miles, 50 underwater, runs literally 24/7, carrying in this case, 660 megawatts, and has done so for 20 years.
Thank you, Council Pamplin. Are there other comments or questions from the council? Okay, hearing none. It's my understanding that there currently is not anyone who has previously signed up for providing testimony tonight. If you wish to do so, you still may, or you can raise your hand and approach the mic. We certainly would want to have you state your name for the record. So let me see if we have any participants who'd like to offer a comment. Seeing none, if you change your mind here in the next minute or so, I'll provide a couple other comments, but please raise your hands in the meantime and we can still take your comments. As you can see, this is the beginning of the beginning and we will take your comments, sir. So why don't we just do that? And if you would, I believe you'd need to step to the microphone and just state your name for the record, please.
Yeah, my name is Ken Benningfield and I'm a union worker, but also reside out there in Home Valley from Stevenson. So I'm really tight knit with the community. My fiance is actually starting a business out there as well. So we're all part of the fishing and the natural resources that are out there for us to enjoy. And my only question to you was that the underwater line you guys do have in San Francisco for 20 years, how much maintenance have you guys had to do on that line underwater so far?
Well, the San Francisco line, actually, Tyler, do you know the answer to that? I know that with the exception of an anchor strike, with its 15-year life, there was no maintenance on. The maintenance is in the converter stations. Okay. The line itself, like I said, it requires none of that. And we've not had any maintenance on our lines, our underwater lines in New York, New Jersey.
Perfect. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you for the questions. Any other folks who'd like to step up, offer a word? Okay, well then soon we will bring this to a close. I should have noted, and I'll do so just a couple points for the record. Ordinarily, we do take about 3 minutes per comment. And is there another, Ms. Grantham?
Yes, Chair Beckett. I see someone online with their hand raised. Looks like a Brian Matson.
Okay. Mr. Matson, if you'd like to offer your comments, we would certainly welcome them at this time and would appreciate trying to stick to the 3 minutes, which is our standard.
Thank you, sir. Brian Matson, I'm with Clark County. I'm just curious, you've mentioned possible anchor strikes a couple of times. I have no idea. That's why I'm asking this question. What would happen if you got an anchor strike and it compromised the sleeve and the cable inside was exposed to the water? What happens if that was to occur?
Well, it doesn't happen very often, I'll say that. The cable is buried 10 to 15 feet below the sediment. So it's a very, very, very unusual event. When something like that happens, and it has been known to happen, it's repaired with a splice, as you might repair, a much smaller cable. It's of course a little more difficult because you have to pull out the section of damaged cable, bring it up to a barge, you cut away the damaged area, and you splice a new cable. And we have replacement cable on our projects right now that we've never used. But you splice that cable, and that's specialized work, no question about it. But the bottom line is that that's what happens. It's a several week process. You can identify where the damage is. And of course, that would be subject to whatever permitting requirements were in place. It would be considered an emergency of, particularly if it's carrying 1100 megawatt. But it would be subject to whatever environmental considerations might be applicable, which would probably have to do with where it is, when it is, all that kind of thing. But
So
it's doable. We don't like to think about it, but it's doable.
thank you. I get that it would be repaired. But I don't think I worded my question specific enough. Does it kill a certain radius of fish or wildlife? That's what I was wondering. You know, what happens? Does the area underground right, whatever swimming by gets zapped, or
No.
terms. I'm just
Sorry. No, if the question goes to, is there some sort of electrical impact?
Right.
Okay. The answer is no. And the reason is that the minute there's a damage or anything like that, not the minute, the millisecond, the whole system shuts off. And one of the, that's one of the reasons for the fiber, thanks, I'm getting prompted here. Fiber optic cable is that it's a continuous means of communication between the converter stations, and it tells the operator, oops, we've got a problem, and it shuts off in like a fraction of a second. So no, there's not electricity in the water or anything like that.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Hawker. Mr. Mattson, thank you for your questions. Any other comments online, Ms. Grantham? Or hands raised, I should say.
Yes, I see a Ryan Hinch.
Ryan
Hi,
Hinch?
thank you. Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
All right, thank you so much for taking time to talk to us tonight. I had actually two questions. Would you like me to give them to you at the same time or separately?
I think if you could state both for the record at the same time, and given this is an informational meeting, I'm employing a little extra latitude on the dialogue here tonight, but obviously questions draw out answers. So please offer your questions, and our applicants, I'm sure, will do their best to answer them.
I was curious about raising water temperatures, considering that, cables put off a lot of heat. And my second question was, what does the end of useful life look like? Like cleaning up, replacement, what does that look like?
On the first question, which was the temperature question, we have modeled the thermal impact of the cable. And the short answer is, and I'll try to be short, is that at 10 feet or more below the sediment, below the mud line, certainly if you were right at the cable, you would know that it was warm. That's really not trying to be flip, because it's warm, but it's not like ultra hot. But by the time the heat rises through the sediment into the water column, there's no change. For much the same reason as if you wouldn't want to touch a light bulb, but if you held your hand, a foot away from the light bulb, you probably wouldn't feel much. So between the sediment and the water, it dissipates the heat so that by the time it rises to the water column, there's no impact. Second is what happens, if I state your question correctly, what happens at the end of its useful life? That's actually a determination for the agencies, because you could probably make a case either to leave it in place as an inert object that's been there for 50 years or whatever, or you could make a case that, well, it's not part of the natural environment, so take it out. And we would do either.
Understood. Thank you for the questions and for the information and response. Any other online hands or in our audience? I see another person. If you'd come forward and please state your name for the record, and we will reset the clock for 3 minutes. Welcome.
My name is Kate Murphy, and I actually just also had a question, which is, I know that you negotiated the route to avoid some of the Superfund sites that have been identified where the concentrations of contamination are. I'm curious, since we have advisories for throughout the mid-Columbia for things like PCBs and mercury, what type of modeling and research have you done around stirring up those potential contaminants and making those more available? Yeah, that's my question. Thank you.
Good question. First of all, the route itself will avoid any of the, I'll call it surface contamination, the heavy contamination, for instance, in the Willamette, where our cable would go so far below that there would be no impact. We have done what's called sediment transport modeling to indicate, is there a lot of stuff, whatever it is, stirred up and taken down the river? The answer is very little. And just generally to your point is the concentration, the unacceptable concentration of contaminants. We have avoided that in our routing. So we don't feel, and we can show you studies that indicate that where we're going and the impact of the installation process would not create sort of a cloud of contaminants going down the river.
Thank you. I'd love to see those studies if those could be made available publicly. And I also have a question about the Bonneville Dam, Bradford Island Superfund site specifically. Given that the folks in charge of investigating that site have not yet established the nature and extent of the contamination, and that's still ongoing, what kind of confidence level do you have that you have avoided the boundary of the contamination since it hasn't been established?
Well, I should have mentioned, and will mention now, that we have done at this point some limited soil sampling on either side of the Bonneville Dam, because we'll be exiting the river east of the dam and re-entering. So it was important to do sediment characterization in those locations. And so we did not find contaminants in those locations. So we're aware of the, is it Bradford Island? We're aware of that, but are convinced that where we're going is avoiding that particular location completely.
The nature of that contamination at that site is not, I would encourage more studies because there's pockets of contamination. It's not just ubiquitous throughout the environment, because there was a lot of dumping that happened then, and not all of that was tracked well. So I wouldn't be too confident just based off a small sample set because of that. But I appreciate that. And if you can point us to where those studies are available, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you for your questions as well as the responses, which may be slightly out of the norm, but I think ultimately is an ability to capture questions that are on people's mind and know that the council as well as our processes are ultimately reflective of those in what the council chooses to do. So with that, any other last people? Seeing none, then I will move, and I'm sorry, council members, any other closing questions, comments? Okay, then we will conclude the first portion of our hearing at 6:39 p.m. And I will do the thing of gaveling us back in and starting our second item this evening. So I will call this land use consistency hearing to order. Again, Kurt Beckett, Chair of the Energy Facility South Evaluation Council. And this hearing is required by RCW 80.50.090 parens 2 and the Washington Administrative Code 463-26-035. During this hearing, we will have testimony regarding the proposed project's consistency and compliance with land use plans and zoning ordinances. That is the only subject that will be allowed during this hearing, given we've taken general comments previously. And this hearing is now very specifically in order for the council to create the record and make a determination on land use consistency and compliance with land use plans and zoning ordinances. Comments and other topics will be asked to be directing their comments online or with staff separately. So with that, I'm going to ask Ms. Grantham to call the roll again as is required.
Certainly, Chair Bucket. Department of Commerce.
Elizabeth Osborne, present.
Department of Ecology.
Blake Nelson, present.
Department of Fish and Wildlife.
Nate Pamplin, present.
Department of Natural Resources.
Maverick Ryan, present.
Utilities and Transportation Commission.
Brian Rybarek, present.
Assistant Attorney General John Thompson.
Present.
Administrative Law Judge Courtney Beebe.
I am present.
The council staff that are present. Sonia Bumpus.
Present.
Amy Hockemeyer.
Present.
Lance Caputo.
Present.
Carl Halafa.
Present.
Maria Belkina.
Present.
And Lisa McLean.
Present.
And did we have anyone for the Council for the Environment show up yet? Chair, there is a quorum.
Thank you. Soon I will be asking Judge Beebe to actually take over this portion of the meeting, but if I may first, Judge, let me note for the public who are still here that both the full application can be found on the FSEC website under our project section, as well as that process proceeds. You can always look there for supportive studies. I know there's a question of where that might be accessed. That may not necessarily be true today, but over the course of time, those are the materials that are present on the FSEC website and transparent for the public's access. So with that, let me turn this to Judge Beebe, who again will be taking any testimony. It's my understanding we may not have any this evening. I should also note that we'll be conducting these hearings, both Part A and Part B, both tonight as well as tomorrow night in Skamania County and followed by the third night in Klickitat County. That is part of the underlying statute that FSEC operates in, that after an application is received within 60 days, we would start that process in the communities in which the project will be housed. So apologies for not making that part of my earlier opening comment, but perhaps as a close. So with that, Judge Beebe, let me turn this to you, and we will see if we have any further comments to be presented on land use. Judge Beebe.
Thank you. Just a brief introduction regarding the role of the Office of Administrative Hearings in your public meeting. The Office of Administrative Hearings is an independent agency. My role here today is to ensure that there is a complete record of public comment. We will only be taking public comment on how the site is or is not consistent or is not in compliance with applicable land use plans and zoning ordinances. Public comment is limited to 3 minutes per person. We will not be allowing the asking of questions or any information exchange. The purpose of this portion is to allow comments. These comments may prompt a need for answers, but the purpose of this portion of the hearing is only to allow the comments and to create the record. Following this land use consistency hearing, I shall draft an order, including findings of fact, appropriate portions of relevant law and code, proposed conclusions of law regarding whether the proposed site is consistent and in compliance with applicable land use plans and zoning ordinances. For the record, the applicable law is RCW 80.50.090 subsection 2 and Washington Administrative Code Chapter 463-26. I shall provide a draft order to the FSEC assigned AAG and staff for any revisions and review prior to them proposing the order to the council with a recommendation. So with that, if there is a first person on the list, I'll defer to you, Ms. Grantham, regarding calling the person to speak.
Thank you. I would like to direct that the applicant actually has a presentation for the land use consistency hearing first.
Apologies for missing that piece. So
if the applicant would like to begin with their presentation, and then we can begin with public comment.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Malia Bassett. I'm a senior environmental planner, and I'm on the CRT team. And I am going to talk about land use consistency in Clark County. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So, Chris, do you want to give just a quick overview again, if folks weren't here?
Yeah, this is basically a repeat of my previous presentation. But the project, of course, is about 100 miles underwater and underground. It's 80 of that is in the river, the green line up at the top. The land portions include about 5 miles in the Portland area, about 5 miles in the Dalles area, and about 7.5 miles to bypass the Bonneville Dam. And that's what the yellow lines are. Those are the buried underground portions.
So as you can see in the center there, the on-land portion starts around, comes out of the Columbia River and goes on land in Stevenson, and then goes west, and then goes back into the Columbia River after the Bonneville Dam. So next slide, please. There actually isn't any next slide. On land portions in Clark County, but I will be going through the in-water portions that are in the Columbia River adjacent to Clark County. So there are 7, we're referring to them as segments. That's because the center of the Columbia River is the border between Washington State and Oregon State, and the line maneuvers in and out of the state. So there's 7 segments of the line that come into Washington and then exit between the boundaries of Clark County. And that's about 8 miles total. So I'm going to walk through those so you can see where the line enters Washington and exits. So those 7 segments. Next slide, please. So the yellow highlight is highlighting the line, which is represented with the red dashes. You can see that around River Mile 177, the line just barely crosses over to Washington and then exits back into Oregon. Same thing you're seeing as we go down the river. 117. Oh, yeah, I can barely see that. Sorry. 117 River Mile, and then going east to River Mile 121. So we have 3 segments right there we're looking at where the line enters and exits Washington State. Next slide. Same thing here. There's a little carryover from the previous slide at River Mile 121, and then two full segments coming in and out of Washington State, and then one back in Washington State at 124.5. And then next slide. Then there's the continuation of the segment in the last slide around 125 to almost 127. And then you see the last segment there between 127 and 129. And just to reiterate, these are the components on land in Washington. Clark County is not listed there, so there's actually no on land components. There's only in water. And like it was said previously, we will be discussing the on land components tomorrow and Wednesday. For now, that's it for Clark County. Tim, did you want to say anything about consistency?
Tim McMahon here. I represent the applicant, and I'm a lawyer with Stoll Reeves Law Firm in Portland. And so this is going to be a little bit boring because we're in Clark County, which is an area with no terrestrial impacts from the project. So as you've heard this evening, the land use consistency hearing's purpose is to determine whether the project is, these are very important words out of the statute, whether the project is consistent and in compliance with local land use plans and zoning ordinances. And FSEC ultimately makes that determination. So the relevant inquiry for FSEC's initial land use analysis is, and I quote, whether the pertinent land use provisions prohibit the proposed project site, in quotes, expressly or by operation clearly, convincingly, and unequivocally. So just fairly strong words that frame the discussion here. If a proposed project can be permitted either outright or conditionally, it is considered consistent and in compliance with local land use provisions for purposes of RCW 8050-090 sub 2. So for tonight's hearing, this is in fact a very limited inquiry. We emphasize that the Cascade Renewable Transmission Project proposed in Clark County is entirely underwater within Clark County. Neither the county's zoning code nor the county's comprehensive plan impose land use restrictions on or in water uses in the river and on the river bottom within the Columbia River. We anticipate additional discussions in the coming days to address locations where the transmission line is proposed in terrestrial locations, but that is not being proposed tonight because this is entirely in the water. So sorry that that's kind of boring, but that's what it is in Clark County. We'll have a lot more to talk about tomorrow in Skamania County. So thank you for your time.
Thank you for the presentations. It's helpful. Members of the council, are there comments or questions for our presenters? Hearing none. Judge Beebe, I think I would then turn this to you to seek any public comment at this time. I believe there was one.
And since I don't have the list, I'll just rely on Ms. Grantham if she could call their name and ask them to come to the microphone.
Certainly will do. As of right now, we only have one speaker signed up, and that is Nathan Baker.
Good evening, Chair Beckett, members of the council. My name is Nathan Baker. I'm the senior staff attorney with Friends of the Columbia Gorge. And I'd like to talk about 3 procedural issues tonight. You could consider them objections if necessary. The first is that the deadline for written public comment is unclear at best. There's no deadline stated on any of the materials for submitting written public comment. I did hear Chair Beckett say tonight that comment will be accepted throughout the process, but it isn't clear whether that's for land use consistency. If you look at the hearing notice, it really discourages written public comment. It says, if you are unable to attend the hearing, then submit comments in writing. And I know that during this session, or this segment of this hearing, you're not to be deliberating or responding to my points, but we would ask that tonight, before this hearing concludes, you keep the record open until a date, time, and certain. And we would suggest 30 days from Wednesday for that. Keep the record open and provide some clarity about when public comments can be submitted in writing. The second issue is the fact that the applicant has only submitted a draft application and the legal ramifications of that fact. It's very clearly a draft application. It's labeled as a draft on page 1 more than 200 times in the application. It's in the footers denoted as a draft application. It's described as a draft on the FSEC website. There's even internal comments in the metadata in the document from the land use planners and from the applicant's attorney that are, it's clearly still a draft with comments back and forth between them. And so what does that mean? We think that FSEC should not have accepted this and started the process, and instead should have told the applicant, we'll wait until you submit a final application to start the process. But either way, there will have to be a final application submitted, and there will unfortunately need to be another round of hearings when the final application is submitted. That's under the statute. Whenever an application is submitted, it kicks off the requirement to hold the hearings. And finally, I've heard no mention of Clark County's appointee to the council for this matter. That's required by the statute. That's required every hearing where the site is considered. Clark County is to be appointing a member of the council, and we've heard no mention of that. So all the more reason for another hearing, another informational hearing and land use hearing with the participation of Clark County's appointee for the project. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And
That
Ms.
is
Grant?
the only speaker that, apologies, that is the only speaker that I have signed up for tonight.
Okay. I'm looking online just very quickly to see if there's any, looks like we have Brian Matson has raised his hand. So Mr. Matson, this is Judge Beebe. I will give you 3 minutes as well, which will begin now. And again, just again, this is just public comment on the land use compliance.
Thank you, Brian Matson. I won't need the full 3 minutes. So, but I wanted to remind the gentleman from Stoll Reeves that Clark County still has a shoreline management program that's part of their zoning code, and anything in the water will be considered in Clark County's jurisdiction. If it's under the water, it'll be considered in the aquatic environment type. And the gentleman from ecology probably has some insight into our shoreline management program, because I believe that ecology has to approve it. So that's all I had. Just wanted to make sure that that was included.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Matson. I don't see any other online hands up. Any other individuals who are attending online, if you want to use the hand raise feature. Okay, I don't see any individuals online, and no others have signed up. So I will defer to you, Chairperson Beckett, if you want to inquire further of additional public testimony.
Thank you, Judge Beebe. Let me do one final call on land use questions from those in attendance here in person tonight. And seeing none, Judge, I'm going to close the meeting or the hearing here in just a moment, but let me double check if there's any other closing business that you had.
I will defer to you and to your legal counsel regarding the request to keep the record open. I would simply note that as it would depend, it would impact the timeline for me drafting an order to propose to the council.
Appreciate that clarification. I don't think we'll be in a position to do that here live in the hearing tonight, but certainly appreciate the input and the questions, and certainly on the public comment period, I'm sure we will have that answered this week. So with that, let me thank everyone who has taken their time to participate this evening, whether in listen-only mode or more active participation. We certainly appreciate you helping us begin this process. And let me check with our council members to see if there's any closing questions or comments. And I believe Director Bumpus may have a couple items to add in, which is welcome. Director Bumpus.
Thank you, Chair Beckett. I just wanted to note for the record, just to clarify that on the FSEC website for our hearing, specifically the informational hearing and the land use hearing this evening for Clark County, the comment period shows it starts at 5:30 p.m., which was the timing that we started this meeting, and ends at 11:59 p.m. So our online comment system, even though we will be concluding this hearing tonight, the comment system will be available online until 11:59 tonight.
Thank you for the additional clarification. And with that, we are then adjourned at 7:01 p.m. Thank you very much.
Thank you.